All right, so we'll go through this. It's a very big topic. There's lots to say. I drew the short straw. This was Wes's talk, and then he left, so now it's my talk. But basically, it's what happens when you're replacing analyzers and PLCs, and sample systems in general. What happens if you're taking various components, and what do you need to worry about? What are the things to consider as you go through? All the stuff that we've learned. So one of the things that we've struggled a little bit with is communication with our customers to let us know what they're expecting us to replace. So when we say we're going to come in and replace your analyzers, we're just going to replace the analyzers. And so if you have a sample system that's not doing well, then we have to know that that's a problem. And so we have to define what the scope of the work is going to be. Are we just replacing the analyzers? What impact does that have on some other things? So we have to be as concise as possible. If I'm taking a 951Cs, and yes, there are still some people that have 951Cs out there, and there's nothing wrong with those analyzers except that they're old and you can't get parts for them. So that's the issue. But analyzer depth becomes a problem because the 951Cs were only about this deep, and all the new analyzers are this deep. And now you have a problem, especially if you have a 30-inch deep cabinet. Michigan Power, who needs to replace these analyzers, and I got a 24-inch, 25-inch, 26-inch analyzer that's going into that spot. So we need to pay attention to that. And in addition to that, as you extend that analyzer back, is there something in the way? Maybe there's a power strip that's mounted to the side back there, and that's where everything's plugged into, and you have to pay attention to that. So the analyzer depth is a critical issue. What style of analyzer are you using? The old 951Cs, the Rosemont NGAs, are pressure side analyzers, and then so they're forcing the sample through, whereas the Thermo IQ analyzers, the Teledyne API analyzers are all vacuum analyzers where the sample is pulled across and the analyzer just takes what it needs rather than pushing it through the analyzer. So you have to reconfigure your pumps. You don't have to change much, but you do have to change where you're pushing, whether you're pushing or pulling is basically what it amounts to. So we have to know that. Are there enough power outlets? If you choose the thermo analyzer, it's not a problem. The pump's inside. You got one plug coming out of the back. You got a plug coming out of your old analyzer, not a problem. You pick an API analyzer, now that their NOx analyzer has an external pump that sits on the floor. Do you have room for that? Do you have a plug for that? Is there outlet there that you need to take care of? So those are things that you need to consider as you're looking at replacing some components in the system. You have to look at and see if you have enough plugs for things, if things are in the way, etc. Oops. Bob was here yesterday and had a whole bunch of pictures of his sample drawer and his wall panels and things with all the solenoids all put there. We don't use those. We use most of the components from all of those, and we put together our own panels usually and typically. But we also know we're going into systems where other people had used those, and they're there, and they're mounted on the wall, or they're in a drawer, or wherever they happen to be. Are they working? Are they functioning? Are those things that we're going to be replacing? If they're in perfect working order and we don't need to worry about it, it's not a big deal. But if we're replacing those, we need to know that. We need to know that we're going to come in with new panels. Are they going to be mounted on the wall? Are they going to be mounted in a rack? And we need to have all of those things defined. Sample pumps, are they of adequate size? One of the things that we've noticed recently, I was just at a plant not too long ago in California, and I went in there and they got these tiny, tiny little pumps that are sucking the sample. Well, is that enough? Is that big enough for what they're trying to do? And that we have to determine that. And is the pump that you've been using adequate for the new analyzers that are going into this space? Is it adequate for what we're putting into the system? So we have to look at that. Sample dryer. Are they of adequate size? One of the things that we heard yesterday, and you're going to talk about today, I'm sure, is the different sizes of of sample dryers that you're going to have. And so you need to know, well, is the stack really wet? Is it something I need to have extra drying capability on? Is a 5-inch impinger enough? Do I need a 10? Do I need, what all is involved in that? And it actually gets a little more involved with that, because if you have one of our water baths as an example, which Bob had a picture of one of our water baths. Did he steal that from us? I don't know how he got that. But anyway, I'm sure we have it on our website. But the water baths, they have very low entry points. And so when you go to the shelter and there's a bulkhead that sample line's coming in, it might be coming in at knee high. Whereas you get a PermaPure and that's got to come in from the top, and it stands on a stack that's about waist high. Well, you can't run that sample line up and create that trap in there, so you need to move where that sample line comes into the system. So every one of these little considerations is something we need to pay attention to. Can your shelter handle that? Do you have enough room on the bulkhead? Do we need to create a new one? We can do all those things, but we need to have all that information up front. So the key element is lots of pictures. I harp at my technicians, pictures all the time. And I ask the clients that same thing. If you have one of our systems that was delivered years and years ago, we have the photos. They're on our server. We can look them up. But did something change? I went down to a system down in Texas, a Calpine plant, and I walked in the shelter and they had a full desk in an 8x8 shelter behind the rack. Like, how? I mean, well, why was another question, but they needed something to put things on, so they put it there. But it was like, we need to see what's in that shelter. So we're going to ask for a lot of pictures. Are we doing a heated sample line? The heated sample line guys that were talking yesterday from O'Brien, they used a different terminology, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a separate bundle for the calibration tubes and the backflush and things. We do too a lot. We don't always do that. Is Derek here yet? I saw him in the hall. He's not. The Thermon lines, oftentimes we don't do that. We bundle them all together, but sometimes we use a separate, we call it a probe support bundle, because it's supporting the probe with power, backflush, cal lines that don't have to be heated. And so it's a separate little tube. The beauty of that is we stock it. It's in our back lot. It's inside of our offices. We drag it out, measure it, chop it. You can cut it to any length you need. So it's really quite simple to do. And it's relatively inexpensive compared to buying a new sample line. And if you don't need to replace that part, then it's a lot cheaper. And that's what they were talking about yesterday. It's the heater that fails in sample lines. But are we doing that? Are we changing that? Are we going to a different kind of line? Are there power requirements different? Do you have an old technical heaters line that was a serial line that can't be field cut? That's a possibility. We had a plant and they were talking about measuring lines to be the right length, and don't worry about it, you can chop some off. Well, some lines you can't. And we had a plant down in Texas order a sample line. He ordered 3 of them, and he ordered them all the same length. One of them was 190 feet too long. 190 feet. What are you going to, you can only go around the stack so many times. I don't know what they were going to do. It was 190 feet. You guys remember that. Is a plant visit by us beneficial? We always would say yes, but we wanted the ability to come out and take a look at what we're up against, and going in and looking at that. Is this something you want us to do? Is it required? Is it expected? All of those things need to be defined up front. When we work, we always want to send our technicians in ahead of time. Okay, we want to add a day or so or more per unit so that they can go through the system that exists. We just did a big analyzer replacement up in Oregon. Huge project. And we're up there and the analyzers were having some issues, okay? And the guys were saying, you know, the system was perfect before you got here. The system never failed cows. They never had any issues. And my guys, being the wonderful people that they are, believed them. Then I asked for the data. And I asked for the data for the month before we did the analyzer install. They hadn't passed a cal on every unit in a month. They'd been failing cals every single day. They couldn't have passed a 7-day drift if they had to on their old analyzer. And yet they told us everything was perfect before you got here. It wasn't. We learned a few years ago, we were down doing an analyzer replacement. We walked in, there was water in the tubes, the sampling tubes that were going to the analyzers. What? How could you not be getting alarms constantly and problems all the time? So we have to go through the system. And so one of our instructions to our guys, our technicians, is to go out into the field, and when you first get there, you need to go through the existing system and make sure that it doesn't have any leaks. They were talking about leak checks yesterday. There were a lot of leak check things. Our guys are going to do leak checks on the system. They're going to make sure that everything is running right. They're going to look for water in the system. They're going to make sure it passes cals. That's their job. Before they ever tear into it to take it apart, they need to know that what's there that's staying is functional. Now, we know we're there to replace it because it's not functional, but we need it to be as functional as possible, okay? So that we know that what is staying behind, we have there. So we need to look for all those different things in the system to make sure that it's all functional and working. All right? Are there drawings available for us? We're faced with a rather challenging situation right now in a plant in California where the guys are really, really super nice people. They're wonderful. They're really, we're excited to work with them. They handed me a drawing and said, this is the drawing we have for our system. And the HCl analyzer was on there. They don't have an HCl analyzer. The THC analyzer was on there. They don't have one of those either. I went, I don't think this is accurate because I'm looking at your system and I'm looking at your drawing and you don't have those two analyzers and they're on your drawing. So I think we have a problem. And I think we're now we're working on the project, but I don't know how far along we are because they still can't produce what they actually have in their system, what their IO actually is. And that was because the previous vendor didn't do it for them. I understand that. They didn't provide them with drawings. They didn't provide them with information. The system's been changed 4 times. It was originally a thermo system that was then changed to something else, then was changed to something else. So it's been modified 3 or 4 times. And the documentation never got updated as it went through the system. So that's all important stuff. If we have it, the more information we have, the better off we are to be able to work on the system. One of the other things that we've run across, and this came up recently at several plants, before you take your old analyzers out, we need to have a linearity run on those analyzers before they come out. Remember that data has to be validated. And if you're pulling the analyzers out and you didn't run a linearity on those analyzers and you have 168 hours of operating time on those analyzers that quarter, all that data is going negative or it's going invalid real quick because you need to have that. So before we pull out an analyzer, we need to make sure that there was a recent linearity done on those analyzers. I put CGAs too because we might as well. It's not as big a deal because you can pretty much handle that fairly easily, but let's do CGAs and linearities on those analyzers before we ever pull them out because we don't want to have invalid data for no reason. That would be no reason. So make sure that that was run and your data is valid or your analyzers were validated before we pull them out. So that's a critical situation because we've run into this recently and we just don't want to have it happen. Define who's going to install what. This is kind of a minor little thing, but it's kind of can get big. You ordered new heated sample lines and we show up and you go, did you bring your man lift to put them up? We don't install heated sample lines. We don't do that. We don't have contractor's license. We don't have the ability for our guys to get up into man lifts and do all those things. We just don't do it. Okay, so you need to hire somebody else to do it. And I can find somebody to do it for you. I'll hire somebody. I can find a company that'll put the lines up for you. But we need to define who's going to do that. Uh, we've also found situations which are a little bit less problematic, where we're there to install something and the guys walk in the shelter and, well, the analyzers are already in the rack and they're already plumbed and they already have the wires coming out of the back. They're all done. Well, we were bored. So it's better to know, did you do it right? So that's what we're there for, to make sure that they did everything right. But define that up front. Who's going to install what? Heated sample line is replaced. Are the analyzers the same size? Are the panels needed to fill holes? When we pull an analyzer out, sometimes we're pulling a little tiny little analyzer out and we're putting a big analyzer in there. Is there enough room for that? Sometimes we're taking a really big analyzer and we're putting a little tiny one in there. Do we need to fill a panel? We're doing a project coming up here pretty soon where we're taking out a CO and an O2 in two separate analyzers, and we're putting in a single thermoanalyzer in the rack. And when we do that, it's going to leave a big gap. And so do you want a panel to fill that hole? Or are you okay with that empty? You know, panels cost money too, so we just kind of need to know that. Are support rails needed? That's the depth of the analyzer thing. Because if they're hanging back there, we need supports. Otherwise, they're going to tip and everything's going to break and it's going to be a problem. We don't want that. Do you need to move anything that's electrical? We talked about this already. Or anything else that's out there? Do you need additional electrical plugs? How much downtime is expected? This is one of the biggies that we get all the time. How long is it going to take you to do this? And as soon as we say it'll take us 2 days per unit, the panic button hits and says, well, you're not going to do it. We can't do this. Or if we say it's going to take us 4 hours, they go, well, can you make it 2? Because we can only accept this much downtime, or we're on the clock for this, or we're on the clock for that. We need to know. So we need to be honest and have a fair assessment of how much downtime we can have, but you need to tell us how much downtime you expect. Because if you're up against some regulatory rule, then we maybe need to move this out to when you're in an outage or something like that. So let's think about that. Does the plant need to be in an outage for us to perform the work? So are there any safety requirements on your site? We'd hate to get to a site and go, well, do you have your TWIC card? Or what? Now, most of our guys have those, but that's one of the things that you have to worry about. Do you need that? Are you on a shipping channel somewhere and we need to worry about whether you have one of these cards, or do you need to be escorted everywhere you go? Can we drive onto the plant site? If we're bringing stuff on, or can we drive our vehicles up there, or we have to park 4 miles away and walk, or whatever the rule is? Is there special safety requirements? We do a lot of work in Wyoming at the mines up there. We don't go in the mines. We're definitely not going into any mine. We're sitting in shelters up above on the surface, but it's at a mine, so we have to go through mine safety training. And we all know that, and the guys all know that. So they have to go through their training programs. We're at refineries, and they need to have special drug testing stuff and all the other stuff that goes with that. We just need to know what those safety requirements are and what those special things are up front. So if you have something special, let us know what it is. Are there tools that we can use, or are there everything that we have to supply? We bring most of what we need with us. That's not really an issue. We supply all the guys with all the tools they need. But if there's we're going to be terminating something on an SCR probe, and we're terminating a sample line and we need to get up there, you need to have a man lift or something for us to get there and somebody to run it for us so that we can get in position to help that, or the right scaffolding or the right ladders or platforms for us to get there. So we need to know, are there special things that we're going to need to do that installation at your site? And we'll help out with letting you know, where is the probe? Where is this? Is there a way to get to that? Do we have to do this? Do we have to do that? So all sorts of different things like that are part of that. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, so that's one of the things we have to worry about: floor space and vibration, because all of a sudden, if you're replacing, let's do the extreme case, which is the normal case these days. You have an SCR inlet NOx analyzer, you have a stacked NOx analyzer, you have an ammonia NOx analyzer, and all of a sudden you went with the tappies and you have external pump, external pump, external pump, and they're not small. by the way. Those are big boxes that are sitting down there. All of a sudden, you got to have 3 extra square feet of floor space, and you're going to have some extra pumps, and your vibration numbers are going to go through the roof because those things shake. So all of that stuff has to play into what you're doing and how that's going to work. I did see a really cool installation the other day that we talked about. I don't think I've shared with Bob yet, but Dave and I have talked about it, that kind of would minimize some of that vibration and where those things would go. It was one of our competitors that had something. Right, and you can get an internal pump with TAPI. I'm not trying to promote one or the other. You can order it special, but by standard, that's what you get. But yeah, thermals make it a lot easier because it's inside. Now, Pete, I'm gonna pick on you. Thermo also has something. Pete Pepe's going to talk in a few minutes, but if he's from Thermo, but when they put that pump in there in the original IQ design, they put it in kind of the wrong spot because there was a tube and it rubbed and it caused holes right away. We found that right away. How long did that take? Or it's fine. That was the I series. Yeah, they had the I series and they had that little vibration from C to I, and it was causing those wears and that didn't take long to figure out that was a problem. But yeah, but I think the IQ has fixed all that, so that's not a problem. Yeah. Defining the scope as far as documentation, what are we going to provide you? Are we going to just provide you an IO list? Are we going to provide you a full documentation of what's happening? What about the regulatory requirements that are involved if we change something? If you're changing analyzers, you know all the stuff you need to do. You need a 7-day drift test. You need a RADA. You need linearities. Initially, you just need to do the cal. That's the key element to do that right away. But what are all those things? Are monitoring plan updates needed? Monitoring plan updates aren't usually very hard because the ECMPS makes it really easy, but some people want hard copy monitoring plans, and those are not as easy to do. And so we just need to know, do you need a hard copy monitoring plan as well as the ECMPS updates, or do you have a third-party consultant that does all that work for you already? We obviously have the capabilities. We have a full environmental staff that can do all of that, but we need to know. QA/QC documents. So these are one of my favorite things. QA/QC documents are really cool. Number one, they're required, but number two, they're supposed to be living documents. And I always laugh when the people go, can you just PDF that for me? It was like, well, I can, but it's going to be really hard for you to change. And it's supposed to be a document that you keep updated on a regular basis, and it's a living document. That's the reference for it. And so it's supposed to be updated regularly as to what you actually do versus what we recommended for you to do when the system was there or whoever put in your original system. And so having it in some other form, Microsoft Word, Excel, whatever format you put it in, is kind of ideal, because then we can take that and update that. We can make it modern. We can make it more modern, what's going on. A lot of people go, well, just start over. Well, okay, we can do that too, and we will. But if you provide us what you have, things get it goes a lot faster, a lot better, because then we know everything that's in your system. And we start asking questions. I didn't see that THC analyzer or whatever that happens to be. We can look at all those things. So we have all that stuff that we look at. Does one exist? Can it be provided? Do you want us to provide it for you? Do you have a third-party consultant that does this? Do you do this in-house? Well, there's lots of questions that go with all this stuff. Certification requirements. Do you need us to prepare the plan? Do you have a stack team that's going to do that? One of the things Air Hygiene talked about yesterday, and Paul, was they provide these plans. They charge for that. That wasn't a free service that he was offering up there. They have a free service for going to XML, which I was shocked at, and we're going to take advantage of. But the certification plan is not a free thing that they're going to do for you automatically. It's something you have to ask for, and will do, or you might have a consultant that does. So we just need to know who's in charge of that, who's dealing with that. We'll typically, if we're doing any analyzer replacements or any PLC replacements, we're going to give you a new IO list as to what's out there. We're going to take off the THC analyzer if it doesn't exist. So when we do Woodland in a few weeks, we're going to make sure that they don't have the analyzers they don't have on the IO list. So is there a new DOS specification that's required? This is something that actually you should spend a little bit more time with. I always love it, and I'm not picking on anybody, I'm just being honest. When a customer calls up and says, well, you don't have our new permit in any of our software. But did you send it to us? Well, no. Well, we just don't go looking for permits for every one of our plants on a weekly basis. It's just not something we do. So if you get a new permit, please send it to us. We would love to help you. We can help you. Most of the time, the changes are so minor that we aren't even going to charge you for it. But we need to know that you had it. And so if you have new permits, did you have a new DOS specification? Did you redefine what startup is? What shutdown is? Has all that been looked at? Is there some new definition that you need to worry about monitoring emissions during startup and shutdown? All those things are important. And DOS specification is where we come in to make sure that all the rules are in there. New drawings. If the system was originally supplied by CiSCO, then obviously we have the drawings somewhere. Not all of them are electronic due to some rather strange ways of keeping track of old documents. But we do have the drawings somewhere, and we can recreate those if need be. And so we can modify the drawings and get those up to speed if you expect new drawings on your system. If someone else has done the system and we're just coming in and kind of putting things together, unless you can send us a CAD drawing of that we can then modify, it's probably going to be almost impossible for us to do anything except what we did. We can give you a new drawing of your PLC, might be able to give you a new rack layout or something like that, but that's about it. O&M manuals, operation and maintenance manuals. Are we just doing pages? Do you want hard copies? Are we giving you a brand new manual all the way through from, those are expensive, but we can do it. Or just want an electronic version? We went to an electronic version. What do you call those little things? Little credit card, USB credit card looking things that we send them out on now. They have a little CiSCO logo on them and all that. They're pretty cool. Shane did it all. So Shane have you noticed Shane does everything? She's kind of on the marketing side. She runs this thing. She's a technical writer. She puts together the O&M manuals. So she does a lot of stuff for us. Will the analyzer ranges stay the same? So we'll pick on a couple. The old 951Cs had very limited range capabilities. You could do this range and this range, or this range and that range, and that was it. So you had the 250. It was their standard on those. And we can get into the regulations and all the other stuff about what the regulations say about a gas-fired turbine needs to be at this range and this range is ideal and all that. But if you go and get a thermo, you don't have any issues because you guys can go to 500 or whatever on the 42 IQ without any problem. So if you want to stay with the 250, that's not a problem. If you go with the Teledyne API analyzers, the T200Ms only go to 200. You can't go to 250. Well, if your cow gas is 180 and you're really only using the span of 200 as it is, even though the range is 250, well, you can change to 200 if you want to. And less is a little bit more accurate in that regard anyway. So if you want to follow the regs, 150 is almost ideal. So, but 200 is fine. For the NOx analyzers, are they staying the same? We just ran across a problem out in California that we're fixing now, where we kept the analyzer ranges the same, and we shouldn't have. We should have added a high range, or we should have done something else. We just didn't ask those questions that we should have asked. And so now we're going to fix that problem and take care of it. Will the calibration gases need to change? The old Siemens, if you're replacing an old Siemens CO analyzer as an example, they had range relationships that would only allow you to go certain levels. So you could do 0 to 20, 0 to 200, or 0 to 40, 0 to 400. But now all of a sudden your permit says you have to monitor startup emissions and your CO spikes at 2000. Well, Thermo does it. They have solution to that. Put into 48i, 48IQ, I'll get the thing, the 48IQ analyzer, and now you get a 0 to 10, 0 to 2000 range on your CO analyzer. Okay, not a problem. We can do that. We can capture your startup with just one analyzer. We used to have to throw in another CO analyzer for the high range, and that was the way of handling that before, but now the thermals can handle it just fine. Calibrations, gases on site, or is this a new system? Do we need to worry about it? Calibration gases take a while to get. They're not instant. Although air hygiene seemed to think that you could just call them up and you could get cal gases. I've never tried that, but it's going to happen now. They offered all sorts of things yesterday. I didn't miss a trick. But cal gases, are they there? Are they easily available? Are you going to use blended gases or not blended gases? Sometimes we go into a system, we say, you know, we could save you a little bit if you use a blended NOx, CO, low gas. You know, you don't need to have those in separate bottles. But that might change your cal sequence. So, is there an OIT panel in there, an operator interface terminal? Yes, exactly. When we say calibration, we're also referring to CJ and linearities too. It goes all the way through the whole thing. Yep. Everything all the way down. If the range is going to change, everything's going to change. So we need to pay attention to all those gases all the way down. This one, I thought you were raising about this because this one's near and dear to Cliff's heart. If you don't know Cliff Peterson, he's over here. I don't think you were here yesterday when I introduced people. But if there's an OIT in the thing, is it still supported? Got a picture the other day. There was an old Maple panel where it had the green screen here and the buttons over here, and that's how it worked. And it was still in service, still working, still functioning. It was kind of okay. But we have Automation Direct OIT panels that are obsoleted. We have Allen Bradley PLC or OIT panels that are obsoleted that you need to get new software for, new programming for. Those ladies talked about that earlier. We need to know that. Are you going to go to a real view? That's a computer-based system that we use that we did all the software programming on. Okay, it's just a computer-based OIT version of that. And if you want to do that, that's okay too. We just need to know all that stuff up front. How are we going to do all that? How many personnel people, or how many people are going to be involved? Is it going to take 2 of our guys or 1 of our guys? Is it going to take 3 of our guys? 3 of our guys is hard in a shelter because they run into each other, and none of my guys is small. So no, none of them are small. Eric's not very big, but the rest of them. So how many days are we going to be there, and how many people are going to be there? Are you going to help? Is the plant going to help us do any of the work? As I said, we've showed up to some places and it's already done. Yes. Yes. Yep. David. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go we'll go back to this question. This one's kind of funny because we send out for new systems. This happens more with new systems than it does with replacements. People do lie, but when we go out to a brand new system, the brand new plant's just being built, and we send out this notice to Kiewit or to Black & Veatch or GE or whoever we're working with, whoever our contracts with, startup checklist. Have you done this, 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 and this? And they go, yes, 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 yes. We get out there and they've done one of those things. They're planning on it. It was on the schedule, but that happens more often than with actual power plants that are being modified. But yeah, we still need photos. We still need everything taken, documented. No, Brad retired. Yeah, he's just gambling up in Blackhawk, I think. I don't know what he's doing. Yeah, he and his wife are up there gambling like crazy. They have fun. We have a lot of people. Let's see who's here. Cliff's right here. Raise your hand, Cliff. Cliff's still here. He's been here forever. Richard was here a little while ago. I don't see him now, but he was sitting up here a little while ago. Richard's doing some work, Larry's doing work, and Josh is doing work as well. So we have 4 guys down in the PLC department that are programming the PLCs. Yep. We have a lot. Well, we have a lot of people once. Cisco's kind of where people go to die. So they kind of, that sounds funny, but they stay there forever. And up until recently, our average length of service of an employee was 17 years. That was our average. I've been there 25. Cliff's been there 27, 28. So Cliff's been around a long time. Kevin's been here 25 years. Yeah, we just kind of keep sticking around. Bob's been 23. So we've been around. Ray is old, but he hasn't been here as long as us. So see, only 22. And the only reason he came was Montgomery Ward shut down and he couldn't fix TVs anymore. So that's really what it was. But people stay a long time. But if you look at our workforce now, Chris, Austin, they're back in the back. Thomas is sitting down back here. Shane, our workforce is, our welding shop, this is funny, I love this. A year and a half ago, our welding shop had a 65-year-old welder, a 58-year-old welder, a 50-year-old man, and a 27-year-old kid. And all but one of them could weld, and he was the 50-year-old. And the rest of them were all welders. They were all great. They were all certified. They were certified. Well, the oldest guy retired. The next guy moved to a different job in our company. He's now in the CAD department. One of the guys left to do other work, I guess. And now my entire welding shop is a 28-year-old kid. He's now the boss, and he is terrific and fabulous. I got a 24-year-old, a 22-year-old, and a 21-year-old. That's in a year. That age difference is, we're a young company now. I'm excited. It's exciting to go to work every day because the young people that are there are really good, and I like them, and they're really exciting to be around and to work with, and they're excited to be there too and to do their job. So it's, Cliff and I are still hanging on, but and Ray, we're still hanging on. We still like what we do, and that's why we show up every day. But the young group that we have coming in they're terrific. They're absolutely terrific. So that's that was a sidebar altogether. Has nothing to do with assistance at plant. Is there a plant person assigned to the project? We always like that because it's one point of contact at the plant. We try to assign a or a person at Cisco that's in charge of the project. And so that those two people are the heads, they're the communicators, and then they do everything else on the side. So who else is there? What's going on? Who do we communicate with? Can we ship the equipment early? Can we get it there before we show up? Do you have a place to store it? Not outside for analyzers, please. Plant in New Jersey, got their heated sample lines, put them outside, poured down rain, puddles, and then 2 of the sample lines failed and they were upset with us. I didn't put them in the rain, but so warranty is a kind of a weird deal. We worked that out individually because you can have extended warranties and you just pay a little bit more for that. But the warranty, our standard warranty is from the time that we ship the equipment to you is 18 months or 12 months from the time that we start it up, whichever is shorter. I just worked out a deal with a company that's whichever is longer, and we can do that. But so that's the standard warranty. So the analyzer warranties are actually longer than that because Pete, you guys are 2 years now. Tappy's 2 years as well. So their analyzer, so those carry. The Dell computers that we use are 3 years. 3 years on-site warranty. So those are longer than that. But generally speaking, it's the 18. And I got to be honest, if a PLC fails, it's going to fail in the first 20 seconds because it just keeps going and going and going. And Reagan said that too. They last forever. I mean, they never go away. That's one of the problems with having slicks out there is they don't break. They just keep working. And that's part of the problem. Yeah. Yeah, after 30 years, they're finally failing. Oh, okay. Mike. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yeah. So what happens with the warranty is on the analyzer. Let's speak to the analyzers because that's the big one. The rest of them are all kind of minor. But we track warranties in our system, and our new ERP system is going to do an even much better job than our current system. But we do track that. Bob's been our lead on almost all warranty claims on everything, Bob Salerno. But the analyzer side of it, one of our OEM agreements with Thermo is that when your analyzer warranty, our guys are going to fix it. Now we're going to get the parts from them under warranty, but that's why we get a discount on the price of the analyzer. One of the reasons, and the other is because I buy freaking a gazillion of them. But but you get, so that's part of our agreement with Thermo is we're the front line of defense on that. However, if it's beyond our capabilities or it's beyond the parts and pieces and technicians that we have, then we're going to send them off to Thermo and they'll service the warranty on that end. So it'll go a little bit, and the same thing works with Teledyne. So it's the exact same way. That's one of the reasons we get the major discounts from them is because we're the frontline warranty claims on everything. And we stock parts. We have analyzer parts in our shop to make sure that we can fix things as quickly as we can possibly get them out. Our turnaround time is much faster than the analyzer manufacturers, but they have a gazillion people sending analyzers to them, and we have, a couple hundred sending them to us. So it's a lot faster turnaround on our part. But yeah, that's how that works. And we track all that. One more thing on that, just so that you're aware, we have a lot of technicians that are, I don't know whether they're new or not. Bug's been around for a long time. And Robert's been around for a few years now. So we have some technicians, but I recently took all of our analyzer technicians, and I think Austin was your first week, right? And so they all went to factory training in San Diego at the Teledyne API, so that they've all been factory trained intensely for several days on site. And those were our analyzer technicians and all of our field service technicians went. We're doing exactly the same thing with Thermo first week of November, I think is what we have it scheduled for. But they're coming to us. Thermo's coming to us. It worked better for both of us that way. So they're going to come to our offices for a couple of days, and the training's actually going to be in this room. It's not at our place because I don't want the technicians to be distracted. So they're going to come here and focus on learning and being factory trained by the Thermo factory trained people. And that all the training is going to happen right here at this hotel. So it's going to happen. We've already got it arranged. We've already booked the rooms here for that time period. So our guys all get trained by the factory so that they can repair the analyzers as best as possible. So we make sure that our guys are as trained as we can make them. We have a full training shelter at CiSCO. We bought it back from Midlothian, Texas. It doesn't really matter. They bought a new shelter. Well, they bought 4 new shelters from us. And so we shipped down new shelters to them. And I'm down there and I'm talking to the guy, and he's since passed away, unfortunately. But I'm talking to the guy. I said, Wayne, what are you going to do with your old shelter? And he goes, what do you mean? That shelter's in really good shape. What are you going to do with it? And he goes, I don't know. I said, can I take it? He says, well, I'll talk to my manager. And so the plant manager agreed that if I paid for his crane and the truck to get it back to my offices, I could have the shelter. So I paid for half a day of crane work and put it on there and brought the shelter back. And we turned it into a very modern training center. It's got a couple of thermo analyzers, a couple of TAPI analyzers. We have different dryers in there. We have all sorts of different things so that we can train your guys or our guys in a training shelter at our site. We even have a stack. It's not very tall. It's not very big, but it's a stack. And it's even got some burning capabilities that we put on there with a probe sticking out of it and everything else. It's pretty cool. And so we can train our technicians and we can train your technicians. I think there's a couple of people that are going through that later this week. You may not be in here, but they're coming in for training on Thursday or Friday. Friday? Okay. So they're going through that training shelter. It's pretty neat. Maintenance of equipment is essential. This is just reiterating a point I talked about earlier, is maintaining your system. Making sure the equipment has been maintained, make sure you have spare parts so that if we're going through that initially, that we can fix what's there before we put in new analyzers or new PLCs or whatever we're doing, okay? We want to make sure that that's all taken care of. This is just a thing on the PLCs. The GE Fanuc PLCs are gone. They're not even GE anymore. They're RX3Is, and GE sold them to Emerson, so now they're Emerson RX3Is. Okay, GE's not in the PLC business anymore. And I had a conversation with the people from Emerson recently, and they said there's a new version coming out in January, but that's all they could tell me. It's all secret. I don't know. Very few people have those. We use almost Allen Bradley for everything. Sorry, ladies, I have to get in the GE thing, the Emerson thing. So, oops. Slick PLCs, these are obsolete. We need to get them out of there. We're having cards fail. We're having issues. So make sure if you have a Slick in your system or a PLC 5, yes, there's still 1 or 2 of those out there. We need to get those taken care of. Put them in your budget, please, to get those replaced. We need to put in some Compact Logics or Control Logics PLCs pretty soon. Okay, as soon as we can get them, we can do the work. They have a numbering convention that is baffling to me, and Reagan did a really good job today of just kind of brushing over the fact that the 5069s are actually called the 1744s or something like that, or what. They all have different numbers inside. They have 2 different sets of numbers for everything, but that's the latest Compact Logics that we use quite a bit. We still do Control Logics. The only difference from our perspective, I know there's a lot of differences. I'm not going to get into that detail. That's what they were talking about. Control Logics program and the Compact Logics program is virtually identical inside of our software, so there's not anything that's going to be different. It's the Control Logics allows you to have redundancy, redundant power supplies, redundant CPUs. The Compact Logics does not. From our perspective, that's the only difference that we care about. There's some footprint differences and some other things, but they're pretty minor. OIT panels, we talked about those earlier. We use a variety of OIT panels, Allen Bradley, Automation Direct. There are others out there too, but we've been doing panel PCs lately too. A little bit of that. And then RealView is a desktop application. If you want something like that, we can do that as well. We can do that in a panel version. We have one of those in our shop right now, or we did have. I think we shipped it. Yeah, there is one in the training shop. If you have somebody else's system, and I'll casually mention our competitors really quickly, just so you know, ESC Spectrum. If you have an ESC Spectrum system or whatever, they have a data logger. It's kind of this mystery. I call it a black box, but it's not. It's blue. So they have a blue box. 8864, 8832, 8816, whatever they happen to have, is the ESC version of that. They bought another CEMS company called Spectrum. And so they have a data logger. If we're replacing a data logger, we have a wire harness. So the wiring, like Reagan was talking about that. By the way, those replacement things sound cool to me. I don't know. No more wiring. And Cliff and I spent hours wiring PLCs one time, and I don't know how to do that. So that's what we had to. But we rewire all the PLCs, and those modules seem pretty easy to just slap in front and do all that. But we have a wire harness, so we can take the Phoenix connectors on the back of a data logger from ESC and plug it in, and the PLC is already pre-wired at our factory and all checked out, make sure it all works. So if you have one of those, if you have a Semtech now has, they're called a something controller, seal controllers. Those are black boxes, and they are black, and they kind of are secret sauce inside. They're just basically a PLC in a box that you can't touch and you don't know how to program. We don't use those because you have access to all of our programming, so you have access to all of our PLC logic. If something happens to us and you want to fix something, you have access to it, you can do it. But we'll come up with a wire harness for that as well. It's very similar. design, so we don't have to rewire all those connections. That would be crazy. The biggest issue that we've faced on the software side and replacing systems is how are you communicating with your DCS? If it's all hardwired 4 to 20 milliamp signals or digital hardwired signals, no worries. And you don't even have to worry about hackers because they ain't going to hack into that. Okay. But if you have a serial communication link to your DCS, can it be changed to Ethernet? That's kind of a critical path for us. We'd really like to see that happen. We had a site tell us, yes, for $150,000, and I don't think you want to pay that. And I was like, no, I'm not paying anything. I'm just saying, can we change it? And so they said no. So we stuck with some serial communication, and you can do that, but it's a challenge. And so we have to worry about that. Ethernet is the solution we would go with almost exclusively if possible. So you have that communication link. If you have that, is it a Modbus communication? Is it talking some other communication protocol that we need to know? We need to know all of that information before we ever get on site or before we ever start working on the project. We need to know if there is some sort of communication to your DCS other than hardwired signals. We need to know what that is. Okay, if we don't already know, then we need to define it. Okay. Oftentimes, Cliff, we've seen this recently, right? The DCS, they'll send somebody from the DCS company over to be there with us or on the phone as a technical support if something were to go haywire. That's always beneficial so that we know what's going on. We're about to do a project out in California where GE's involved because it's their control system and they're mandating that they be right there with us as we're doing the work. So. Yeah. Yeah, the communication on a serial basis is really a challenge. So any modernization to Ethernet is really where we're going, and we really need to get there. So if possible, communicate with your DCS people and see if you can't make that happen. And it can happen at the same time that we're doing our work too. There's not a lot to it. So those are all the things I just said. See if you have hardwired signals, you avoid all that issue. Somebody asked a question about alarming and could you get access from the analyzers? If you read your analyzers, if your analyzers are connected to our system via Ethernet and we get all those alarms via the Ethernet Modbus communication link or whatever the analyzer is talking, then most of those various settings and stuff are available that we could put into the database if we needed to. Okay, we do that at all the Enbridge sites. They all have that communication, and there's lots and lots of alarms and lots of communication that goes through there. So. Yeah. We didn't talk about the switches aspect or the Ethernet converters, but you fiber optics, you avoid the lightning problem in general, which we get a lot down in Georgia and Louisiana and all those places. Georgia, my favorite story is the Tenaska site in Georgia who went out and bought the KF3 modules we used to communicate with on the slicks. And he went out on eBay and he bought like 20 of them because he goes, they keep getting hit. So he just went out and bought it. So every time he got hit by lightning, he just put another one in. Okay. But yeah, the communication, the Ethernet communication, sometimes the old switches aren't fast enough for what the new communication breaks are. So we need to look at those as well. Keep hitting the wrong button. Okay. This is at the very end. The CiSCO personnel on site, along with plant personnel, need to ensure the system is fully functional. Oftentimes we're going out there to the site and the plant's in an outage. Well, we just put in a brand new PLC, we just put in some brand new stuff, and we can't find out if everything's working right. We're not going through a startup sequence with your system because unless you're going to start up the unit right then, we don't know. And so when you do bring the unit back online, and when it does come back online, then we need to keep track of that and figure that out. However, when the technicians are on site, their expectation is they're going to run a CGA, they're going to run a linearity. They're going to run CALs, obviously. I don't care whether the unit's running or not. I need to know that all the valves are operating correctly, all the gases are flowing correctly. Whether it's a valid linearity for regulatory purposes or not is irrelevant. Is it functional so when you do run that linearity, when you come back online, it's ready to go and it's been tested and it's working. So we need to make sure that the gases are there. We're ready to test that and we can go through that entire system. And then everything else in there. Hit every button on the OIT panel. Hit every button on the real view, whatever it happens to be, and make sure that the system goes out of service and goes back into service and runs a CAL and you can flow gas and you can do everything you're supposed to do and the alarms are coming in and everything that's happening. Everything we can do, we're going to test as thoroughly as we possibly can before we leave site. Usually when you're in an outage, we have a problem because we don't know all the things because the plant's not running. We aren't getting all the plant signals. We aren't getting all that stuff. So in that first week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or month of the system running, keep a list, communicate back to CiSCO what the problems are. I don't want to have this thing going, CiSCO's never fixed this problem. Well, did you send it to us? Well, it's on our list. We're going to send it next week. And so if you keep communication open with the project manager on the project and who's working on the project, and then we get that punch list and we're going to go through that and make sure it's all getting solved right away. Okay. We'll try to get everything done, but as we know, it's not going to happen. And that's what I just talked about. Startup and shutdown are the key elements on that. All right. And then lastly, just for your purposes and our guys' purposes, we want our field service techs to be able to have sign off on what they did. And so we just ask that you sign off on their sheets and time sheets and whatever other sheets they need as they're in the field. They're going to keep notes on what they did, what work they did, and then we just need you to sign off that says, yes, I agree that they did that. That's pretty much simple. So. Whenever you upgrade, certification requirements kick in. And so this came right out of our environmental group. So we'll just run through it. Old analyzers, make sure you run a linearity on those old analyzers. This is part 75. 60 doesn't address it. New analyzers, you have to pass the daily cal check. 7-day drift test, you have 21 days. New analyzers have to pass linearity at 168 within 168 operating hours. New analyzers have to pass RADA 720 operating hours. Submitted event reports via ECMPS. Who's doing that? Are we helping you with that? Those things all need to be defined, but we just need to know that. But these are just some of the checklist things that you need to do and look at. If you put a new sample line in, what has to happen? Sample line is a RADA event if you put a new sample line in. So make sure you do a RADA. You have to do an abbreviated response test. And then if you're replacing the PLC, the only thing that really has to happen, there's no RADA. If all you're doing is replacing the PLCs, no RADA, none of that. You just have to report it into ECMPS. Okay? Change your monitoring plan. Basically what it amounts to. All right. Sorry, did I ramble? A little bit. Questions? Ray. Yep. Everybody understand that? The old Rosemonts had one going out, or some of the Siemens had one. It was an analyzer range changed itself. Now it's dual ranges coming out of the back of the analyzers. We even have one analyzer that we have out there that's 3 ranges, I think. That's not legal, by the way. I better go back to that so you're aware. It's not in the regulations to have the 3 ranges. We're doing it, but only 2 of the ranges are certified. Okay, but they have the 3rd range. It's a South Coast thing. Don't worry about it. Unless you're in South Coast, don't worry about it. It's not worth your worry. They have a rule in South Coast is if you read below 10% of your range of the the range that you're on the analyzer, then you have to report 10% of your range. So if you have a 0 to 10 analyzer, you have to report 1 anytime you go below 1. If you have a 0 to 20 analyzer, you have to report 2 ppm anytime you go below 2. So that's just, it goes the other way too, but that's just, so we put a 0 to 5 ppm NOx analyzer out there. So because the plant that was running runs their unit at about 1.5 ppm, but sometimes they're lower than that. So anyway, it doesn't really matter. All right. Nothing else? Good. I did a great job. No questions.